Welcome to Digital 360 Summit 2020. We are the premier event for senior executives driving industry digitalization, decentralization, and decarbonization. 2020 edition is a free virtual event via Zoom. The dates are August 18th, 19th, and 20th, 2020, and August 25th, 26th, 27th, 2020. We want to thank our sponsors, Texas State University, Greater San Marcos Partnership, and CEDAR. This year's edition has 70 speakers from amazing companies like NASA, Intel, SAP, CPS Energy, Brazos River Authority, Gaterra, Direct Energy, City of Austin, Aclara, Dell, Engie, Exelon, Oracle, Tesla, General Motors, TXDOT, Vistra, Siemens, AT&T, National Grid, Itron, City of Los Angeles, Austin Energy, City of Colorado Springs, and Hunt Energy Network, and over 1,000 attendees. The program has 16 keynotes and 11 panels, followed by 11 white papers and 28 videos. The event covers multiple industry verticals like networks, energy and utilities, buildings and infrastructure, water and wastewater, public safety and new financial tools, smart cities, sensor and edge computing, big data and software, smart mobility, new regulations and business models, space and smart factory, and Industry 4.0. We are also introducing Texas State CEDAR, a new industry research consortium focused on connected infrastructure research enabling big ideas and the topics covered in each of the panels. We at Texas State, Star Park, CEDAR, the Greater San Marcos Partnership, and industry partners are focusing on building 9 living labs to transform applied research and economic development with the goal to delivering one digital world.
Welcome to Digital 360 Summit. I'm delighted that you're all here. Thank you for signing up and coming to probably the most exciting panel and keynote of the summit altogether. We're lucky to have Dr. Pete Blair, talk to us about public safety and the future in digitalization of that sector. As it relates to the Alert Center, and he'll tell you more in his keynote, and I'm super excited about that. And then we have a phenomenal panel that is really pushing the envelope of the future and how financial tools are accelerating to really go hand in hand with the digitalization of industry and how that's all going to evolve. And obviously, if you're a consumer and you use things like Venmo and things like that, you can have a sense for what that could be all about. But you're going to have a fun time with this panel. So as you heard about this CEDAR consortium that we are launching in Texas State, and I'm sitting here at Texas State, and I want to run this by you guys real quick, just to help you understand a little more of what CEDAR is, and then hopefully there'll be some questions or inquiries from some of you. CEDAR is working in collaboration with Dr. Blair. So give me a second here to share my screen and let you see the CEDAR video. Hopefully you're seeing all that, and I'm gonna run the video and turn up your volume. Further ado, let me introduce you to Dr. Blair, who is the Executive Director of the Alert Center, and he's going to tell you all about it. I'm super excited. It's a facility that is unique and nationwide and what it does. And Dr. Blair, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. So if you want to take over my screen and jump into your presentation. It's all yours.
All right, so I'm going to tell you about what Alert does first, and then talk about some of the technology things that may be helpful to us and give you some ideas, and hopefully get more ideas back from you. But I think it's easiest to define who we are by first showing what we're trying to prepare people for. So this is a brief video that comes from the Walmart shooting that happened a little over a year ago now, and in El Paso, Texas. And I will tell you there are some graphic images, so if that bothers you, it runs for a little bit more than a minute, and you can come back after that. So here's the video.
Shot in the leg. I'm looking for my wife. Awesome guns in Walmart right now. AK.
So that's the type of event that we're trying to prepare first responders to react to respond to, and to limit the damage. So as far as Alert goes in particular, we were founded in 2002, a partnership between the San Marcos Police Department, Hays County Sheriff's Office, and Texas State University. We focus right now on in-person scenario-based training, where we try to develop skills for first responders and put them in scenarios that are as close to the real thing as possible, so that when they actually experience it, they're better prepared to respond to those events. We've trained first responders from every state in the union, including the territories and protectorates, and also done some international training. To date, we've reached more than 174,000 first responders across the country. This is just a little heat map that shows law enforcement people that we've trained across the country. And originally we started just training law enforcement, but more recently we've started to work on integrated response, because getting all the first responder elements to work together is how you're going to save the most lives. So this is law enforcement. And then this is the heat map for fire and EMS, where we've started to make inroads there. So not as much penetration at this point, but it grows day by day. In order to set the stage for you about where we see the major problem sets or issues that we deal with, we use a concept that's called chain of survival, and I'm going to walk you through that real quickly, just so you have an idea of how we conceptualize what we're doing during these events. So you start with this person here on the left. This is a person, potential victim in an active attack, and we want to move them over here to the right. Now, when I'm talking to cops, I've always got to tell them, no, that's not a suspect with their hands up. That's a survivor with their arms raised in a V for victory, okay? So the first step in doing that is civilian response. Those are the people who are there first, they're on the ground, and what they do in that first couple minutes has a huge impact on how many people are injured or killed during these events. And so the more effective civilians are at their initial response, the fewer casualties we have. And for every civilian response that's successful, they exit that chain and they go right to survivor status because they're never hurt. Now, as the civilians are doing their initial response, law enforcement's rushing to the scene, and we have the law enforcement response that's coming right behind them. The police are going to come there, they're going to isolate, distract, neutralize the bad guy, and keep them from creating any more victims. So again, effective law enforcement response also exits a lot of people from the chain. They don't need to go any further. But as we know from these events, even in a great response, there usually are people that are still hurt. Some of those people have injuries that are so severe, if they don't get medical assistance in the next few minutes, they're going to die. So the next phase we refer to as stabilizing the person. So if they have a massive bleed that we can put a tourniquet on and stop them from bleeding out or something like that, we're going to stabilize them at this point to keep them from dying immediately. but we also know that many of the injuries that we're going to encounter during these events cannot be solved in the field. They're going to require a higher level of care, particularly a surgeon. And so we have to move them from the scene where they've been injured and transport them to the location where they'll receive definitive care. So getting them from the scene to the definitive care is that transport link. And then lastly, we have the actual definitive care, and that's primarily surgery that we're talking about, usually in a hospital facility that's going to occur. So those are the 5 links to move somebody who gets hurt during one of these events from victim status to survivor status. And we further think about those in 2 different phases of response. So the first phase is what we refer to as stopping the killing. That's the time that the attacker is up and creating new victims, harming more people. And during that phase, the focus is only on stopping that attacker from harming anybody else. We're not concerned about caring for anybody at that time. We're going straight to the attacker, trying to stop the attacker from creating any more victims. After the attacker has been stopped, though, the question is, what do you do from there? And traditionally, when active shooter response was first trained, it was you search for another attacker because there could be another person in this structure who could harm people. And oftentimes, as you're responding in there, you're getting information over the radio from 911 calls and other things like that that is not correct, but suggests that there could be another shooter. And you can't just ignore that, but it's a possibility. And early on in the response in particular, we have limited resources. So rather than going after the possibilities, what we prefer to do is focus on what we know. And the thing that we generally know from the initial response, because we came in and we came past people who were hurt, is that there are people who need medical care. So we refer to that second phase as stopping the dying. And you may have to go back into stop the killing phase if there is another attacker or something else happens like that. But that's how we conceptualize it. First, stop the killing. Second, stop the dying. So that's the framework we use to think about it. Now I'm going to go through and talk about the different links in the chain and give some ideas of where I've heard people talk about some technology type solutions, some smart type solutions to those things, and go from there. So the first area is that civilian response. And the biggest thing that I've seen people talking about and starting to work on is this faster notification. A lot of people have very inexpensive gunshot detection now that they can put in buildings and outside of places so that when there is a gunshot fired, people can be notified immediately that that's what's going on. Tied into that gunshot detection is this idea of situational awareness, which is trying to tell those who are perhaps in a building where in the building the problem's at so that they know where to stay away from or where they should exit through, that sort of thing. So a situational awareness type of technology and those sorts of things would be helpful. I've seen people do some protection-based technologies. At a low end, that's simply locking doors to contain and control areas. That's a difficult problem because if you lock doors too close to where the attack's happening, you can end up trapping people in with the attacker, and you don't want to do that. At the high end of that, I've seen people talk about installing strobe lights and other things like that that may be able to disorient or even disable an attacker through that type of technology. And another area is rapid exit. If we can create an avenue for that person to get out very quickly, then they're out of the attack site. They're less likely to become a victim. I think in particular in a lot of retail stores, they'll have panic bars on the side for fire exits, but they don't open immediately because they're worried about shoplifting in a normal environment. So if you hit that panic door, it will set off a timer, and the timer counts down. I forget, it's 10, 15 seconds, something like that, before the door will actually open. So you're stuck there waiting during that time trying to get out. So that's just some ideas that I've talked to people about there, and I'm happy to hear from you all as we go through this, anything you have or any ideas or questions you have about how those things might work. When we get to law enforcement response, again, faster notification is key. The less time there is between when the shooting starts and when law enforcement knows it's going on, the faster they can get there, the more they can contain it, the more they can stop the problem from happening. Tied in with that also is situational awareness about where exactly is the attack going on. If we have tracking and we're tracking gunshot detection inside of a building, we can show the path of movement of the person, for example, as they're going through there. Route planning about how to get the officers to the scene as quickly as possible, not only like street level planning, but also potentially inside the building, because many of them will be seeing these buildings for the first time. and so they won't know exactly where they should be going. And so filling in them on that, pulling up plans and showing routes can be helpful. And another issue is rapid access. As we train more and more people to respond to these events, particularly schools like to use this lockdown response. So if there's an active attack on campus, they declare a lockdown, they lock all the doors, and that's pretty effective for keeping the attacker from getting to kids that are inside the school. However, the problem that we have is, as law enforcement's responding, sometimes they don't have the keys or whatever is needed to gain access to that facility and to get in. So the ability to rapidly identify the officer and grant them access to the facility as they respond, or if you're locking down different areas, to transition between those areas as they move through. Switching over then to the stop the dying phase, we have stabilization. Patient location is huge. If we don't identify where people were shot, especially for some of these attackers that move a lot in a facility, it can be very difficult for us to get all the people and get help to them in a timely manner. After you've located them, then we think about technology, Internet of Things, and those sorts of technologies to do patient monitoring, to keep track of how that patient's doing, if they suddenly start to crater, if they're all of a sudden doing worse, to notify people that that's happening in a timely manner. And then when we have transport, we start worrying about patient tracking. Okay, where is that patient? Are they inside the structure? Or are they out at what's called a casualty collection point? We're going to put them there before we start transporting to the hospital. And then once they start going, where are they at in their route to the hospital? When are they going to arrive? Which hospital are they at? And that's also tied in, as I was mentioning, to hospital coordination, making sure the hospital knows what's coming to them and about how far out it is. Route planning to get them there in the optimal manner. And that route planning could also be very micro when you start thinking about controlling traffic within a site. Say you have a shopping center and you're going to use certain parking lots for certain things, or you want a certain flow of traffic, being able to maintain that flow of traffic and keep it going that way. And then you get to definitive care, and that's an area that's really the realm of hospitals and doctors. They're also very concerned about patient tracking, but one of the big things they're concerned about really is inventory tracking. When we have a crisis, if you think back to Las Vegas, where you have a bunch of people who are arriving by ambulance, but you also have a bunch of people that are just being dropped off at the hospital by their friends who punched into Google, where's the closest hospital? And all of a sudden, boom, that's where they're going, and they get dumped there. And you're having to treat these people. Keeping track of what's used and who it's used on is a big issue for the hospital as far as trying to bill and get money back for what they've done in treatment. And I know some physicians that got in trouble. I know one in particular who ended up having to leave the hospital that he was at because he didn't bother with any inventory tracking when the Las Vegas shooting happened. He just treated people. And so there were a couple $1 million worth of stuff that was used that they don't know who it was billed to directly, and so the hospital's not happy with him because of that. He ended up ultimately leaving. So that's kind of the definitive care thing. So those are those 5 links and just some areas that I've talked to people about, or from seeing what other people have done, that there may be a technological tie-in. There's one other bigger area that I want to bring up, and that's this issue. So despite all of our advances in communication technology over the last several decades, public response, public safety response still relies on old handheld radios for most of their crisis level communication. Even though they have personal data terminals or portable data terminals in cars, even though they all have their cell phones and they can text back and forth, the radio is still the primary route through which they do the communication during a crisis. And that radio has all kinds of issues, but the biggest issue is when you press the button on the radio, everybody else is dead. No one else can talk. No one can get in. And that causes all kinds of issues in trying to coordinate. Another related topic to that is that there are issues with being able to transmit with those radios because they're not particularly powerful. And so when you go into a large structure or a structure that has a lot of concrete, a lot of steel, oftentimes you can't transmit out successfully. And so that causes a problem. And we've talked to some people about potential for using mesh networks and things like that to kind of expand your range as you push into a structure. But I think the technology exists to solve this problem. I know it because my kids use it all the time when they're gaming. where they've got dozens of people on, all talking at the same time, and they're able to manage, control, shunt them to where they need them to be, and keep track of what they need to keep track of. Just that hasn't crossed over into that public safety sector at all yet, and so it's there. The other thing I didn't mention during my notes here is that we are starting to do a lot of e-learning, and we're starting to look at the use of VR and AR to supplement the training, where we can do some in-training person first and then send out kits afterward, so that you can do sustainment and hopefully over time even improve your skill set that you receive from the in-person training. So that's my prepared lecture notes, and this is my email address if you want to email me, and I'm happy to answer any questions you all might have.
Awesome, fantastic, wow. That's I love the whole sharing of the framework, and then obviously brings it home watching what happened in El Paso. Tell us. Well, where do you, if there are two or I mean, you share multiple areas of opportunity, and probably communications being the most important one. I know that there is the federal government has a new initiative that AT&T is executing called FirstNet, where first responders are supposed to stand up. There's using 4G LTE as the next generation technology, and 4G supports voice over LTE. So this whole push to talk thing would go away as we know it. But obviously every county needs to stand it up, and so that's going to take a while. So other than solving that problem, which I think it's on its way with FirstNet, where would be the top three things that needs a little more research, or what something unique? What is the biggest bang for the buck in terms of saving lives?
So the most important link in that whole chain is the civilian response part of it. Mm-hmm. Because if those civilians respond effectively to start with, they aren't there to be victims. Mm-hmm. And then you don't have to deal with the whole rest of the chain. So anything that ties into alerting them more quickly, helping them to act more effectively when they start to take their protective actions, those things I think are the biggest bang for the bucks and saving the most lives. Mm-hmm. And I think the technology cost on that has come down dramatically on like gunshot detection and things of that sort. Sure. But anything along those lines, I really think is going to help save lives.
Right. I wonder if the team that is focused on their next panel, they're local citizens. They have been witnessing mass shootings for as long as we're adults. Anybody has any questions for Dr. Blair? Any curiosity about anything?
I have a question, Andres.
Go ahead.
I am wondering how this is affected by COVID, and if the technology that's been rolled out due to COVID in the last, 3 to 6 months is actually also going to accelerate technology being deployed for these purposes.
So I think the answer is yes, COVID's had an impact. The first responders are being more cautious about their exposures and things of that sort. Yes, we, at Alert in particular, we've been accelerating our electronic digital posture to do more of the e-learning stuff and get more of that out there more quickly. But what you'll find with law enforcement and then fire services, somewhat slow, but they're more organized than law enforcement is, it's so fragmented that getting mass penetration and getting a massive sea change takes a long time to do. And that's part of the problem we have with the radios and those sorts of things that go on right now, is that there just isn't, there's not standardization. And so all these people have different vendors for their technology. They all have different hardware systems. They all have different software systems. And so because of that fragmentation, it's really difficult. And even within cities, you'll sometimes find that the fire and police operations don't coordinate with each other. And so they didn't talk to each other about whatever technology solutions they're using. And so one side has this really slick solution and the other side has no idea it exists. And so that's a real problem that we have. And so while I think you'll see acceleration of these things for sure, and I think you'll see some money thrown behind it from the federal side of things, it's going to take time to get it to penetrate into the market, which is one of the things that's unique about Alert, is because we have trained across the country and we have touched so many people. We've at least had a touch in more than 9,000 police departments across the country. So that's a little bit more than half of all law enforcement agencies. Mm-hmm. So we have that touch at least, and some credibility there for when solutions do come forward and there are ideas that do work, and we can help in the development of those. We can certainly also help in the pushing those out into the public sector, public safety.
Right. Any other questions? Anyone else?
Yes, I've got a question. I've been working on a project that has to do with the fusion centers around the country, and wondering if you're dealing with police departments that are sitting in fusion centers and how that coordination works.
It doesn't is the problem. So every fusion center is a little different in how they run and what their operations are and that sort of thing. And in a lot of ways, it reminds me somewhat of working with the Israelis. So like the Israelis always come to the table and want to listen and hear what you have to say, and they'll take all your great ideas. And then when you ask them for something back, they're very tight-lipped and there's not much there. And so that's what we find is fusion centers will take in all your information. They will process it. They will do whatever magic they do. And then it's oftentimes very difficult to get products back out of them, at least in a timely manner. And so that's one of those issues. And I get it, because a lot of times it is sensitive information. You want to be careful about who it gets out to. But oftentimes those fusion centers kind of operate off on their own. The exception being when they have good liaisons with the different departments that are putting information in. Those liaisons are active and actively involved in taking information back to the departments that they're working with.
And just a corollary question. One of the issues our panel is going to be dealing with today is data standardization. Are you explicit in stating the data standardization challenges when you're dealing with these departments? Are you waking them up to the fact they could do some standardization?
Yeah, and that's absolutely one of the discussions we have with them. And there are actually some initiatives that actually started over on the fire side that are much less proprietary in how data is developed and designed and dealt with. And so with the idea that you're not now married to this particular industry partner that you chose as your first thing. So I think that it absolutely is relevant and something that we do talk about, and some agencies have started to see the need for that.
Thank you.
There was a comment in the chat I wanted to go to. So the person said it's not a question, it's a comment. This should apply to mass killings, be it bombing, poisoning, knife, sword shooting, etc., and should be adapted to natural disasters with deaths. You can't stop the killer, and the location is a broader area in that situation, but a lot of the rest remains the same. Stop the killing in a natural disaster is going to refer to what are the things in the natural disaster that are causing immediate death, right? Mm-hmm. And so you absolutely can apply these concepts across there, and that's actually one of the selling points we talk to a lot of agencies. We haven't had to sell it as much as we used to, because when active shooters were not considered such a high priority and such an important thing, sometimes they said, well, yeah, but these almost never happen, and so why should we care about it? And we would talk about, well, this pays off in lots of other things, and it absolutely does. And the natural disaster preparation, and particularly now that we've been focusing on integration between police, fire, and EMS, you use that every day, every traffic accident, all the way up the chain to natural disasters, these other things that occur. And the fact that you've worked out those kinks beforehand in lower stakes events allows you to use them more effectively in higher stakes events.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, Pete, I want to thank you for educating us, and I think that this last comment from Jim Beals is really kudos on your framework, and maybe they should be piggybacked in the federal government and all kinds of other situations. If you had to share one parting thought in terms of the vision, where do you want to be 5 years from now? Where do you see digitalization helping you? Where will you be 5 years from now?
So I see us being much more strongly into the electronic learning world and using that to prepare for classes, to follow up after classes, to give deeper dives into areas that we can't cover in as much depth during classes. And then I say the AR and VR training part of it for us being much more involved. And, you know, as we have to talk about what's happening in the rest of the country with police use of force and violence concerns and things of that sort. Our contention is one of the big problems we have with police use of force is that we all expect our police officers to be experts in use of force. We expect them to be like Bruce Lee. And the reality is most of them have less training than a high school athlete would get in a single season of their sport in these areas.
Wow.
And then we put them in life or death situations, and we're surprised when sometimes things go badly. What surprises me is they don't go badly a lot more often. And a lot of it is because of the demands of the job and how much time we have to do training. But that AR and VR really can help fill the gap in the training and allow them to get a lot more smaller training with immediate feedback and what we call deliberate practice, so that they can constantly working on these things in 5 and 10 minute chunks, as opposed to when we do our training, we traditionally do, here's 2 days. Well, we can't always get our officers away for 2 days to do this. And they need constant more reinforcement. And that's where I'd like to see us in 5 years, is much more involved in that, being able to do a much better job of developing the skills of officers and the decision-making of officers about how to move between the different types of skills, so that they have more confidence in what they do, and they can avoid using force when they don't need to, and when they do use force, they use the appropriate force, and it's very effective.
Well, thank you. I wanna thank you on behalf of the audience, and yeah, I know that you run a phenomenal shop that is self-sustaining and has a great mission, and continue your hard work. We at CETR, we will be collaborating with you more and more. I know that there's a significant number of partners in the summit that have reached out with the interest of doing some things related to public safety and all the work that you do. So stay tuned for follow-ups on that. And thank you again. And we're gonna switch gears now, Pete. And so we'll let you go. You're welcome to stick around if you want, but congratulations, thank you. Give him
Thanks,
a hand, everybody. Good job. And in particular, the fact that they do a sensational ongoing job training first responders all year round. So if you ever want to see the facilities, it's just north of the airport in San Marcos. It's a fantastic facility for tactical training of all kinds, and it's an amazing place. So let me switch gears and introduce you to an all good new supersonic superstar friend, Dixon Wright. He's an amazing guy. He is changing so many people's lives. I really love Dixon Wright. He's a special guy if you get to meet him. He is a technologist at heart, even though he's been working in the financial and insurance industry all his life. He loves gadgets, he loves technology, and he is a visionary in terms of the transformation that technology could do for this world. Dixon, I'm going to let you take over the panel. I'm going to go in hiding mode, and you all have a great session.
Andreas, thank you very much. And Pete, thank you very much for your conversation. And I'm sure a lot of people are wondering why public safety is next to new financial tools. And the answer to that is very simple. The people that you see on this panel are all working on modernizing the grid. And it's a huge transition from the old monolithic analog system, just like we're trying to change and transition our police force and our response. We're trying to transition the grid. And what Pete said was a couple of key things. It's a direct interlock. One is notification, and two is situational awareness. So when we look at the people that are on this panel and the financing and the various tools on building the grid, there's a couple things we have to recognize. One, we're trying to create a business environment to allow people to build solar, clean energy projects, any clean energy project that could connect to the grid. But the other thing we have to recognize is that data interoperability creates vulnerabilities. And so if you talk about public safety, the grid is probably the number one thing our nation has to be careful on from a public safety point of view, because it can be attacked by fires, it could be attacked by cyber crimes. At the end of the day, when we're building resiliency, we have to also build effective business tools. And so what we talk about resiliency, it was kind of coincidental, just last week, General Wesley Clark and Congressman Darrell Issa just issued a very comprehensive committee report on resiliency. And recommendation number 5 was you got to have standards, because you cannot track the grid if you don't have consistent standards across the grid. So the first thing for public safety is situational awareness, notification. So as we build our grid on the financial market side and our contractors, we have to recognize that we have to build it in concert with our public safety, resiliency, cyber protection, and all of the things that go with it. So our panel today is going to talk about how the DOE has really stepped forward with a number of programs emanating from the Sunshot program and various other national labs, in which have developed the ability for industry to collectively and collaboratively measure and monitor how our public grid is working, how our contractors are building it, how our insurance companies are insuring it, how our surety bonds are guaranteeing the financial performances. But it all ties back to the public safety. The grid has to be safe. So as we build it and we look at the financial tools that are out there, the DOE has funded a program called Orange Button, in which created the data standard for tracking and monitoring how systems are performing. At the core of resiliency is that capability. At the core of putting together new financial products is that same capability. So today I've asked some of the people that have been very active in the Orange Button, which is a collaboration effort of many, to join with me and share with us exactly what they're doing from the big picture with Al Berkeley, who started originally at NASDAQ and helped put together the data standard for tracking on publicly traded companies, to Jan, who's putting together actual implementation for building residential solar, to John, who's building the financing tools, to Salesforce, which is creating a platform that allows any number of programmers. And from public utilities that are struggling with both the bureaucracy of the past while trying to modernize for the future. It's a challenge that we all collectively have undertaken. And hopefully, as you listen to our panelists, you realize we're not at the beginning, we're actually in the end zone. We are got a lot of resources. The taxonomy is in place, people are using it, and you're going to start to see a resilient, safe environment for our grid. So my first introduction is to really the gentleman who started it all for me, Al Berkeley, who has been active in the data interoperability scene for 1 or 2 weeks. Al, I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself and what you're doing on the big screen to help transition to digital.
Yeah, well, a little bit of history. I don't want to bore people, but the issue of making machine readable data available to the public for publicly traded companies is how I got involved in this. I was president of the NASDAQ in the late 1990s, early 2000s, and the SEC was interested in getting away from PDFs and helping people really do analysis with the data that was in the huge database called Edgar. And so we wanted to create a standard setting body that would allow people to have confidence that their definition of data would be accepted and that the government would in fact accept that data. So we set up a nonprofit called XBRL-US, Extensible Business Reporting Language is what XBRL stands for. And we began working what we thought was a 3-year project. It's been almost 20 years, but we're now we've got a lot of progress and things are happening in a significant way, even in the footnotes of public companies. The interesting piece to me is what I've learned internationally. I happen to have been on the board of the World Economic Forum for about 11 years, and I watched other countries move ahead quickly with data standardization and defined vocabularies. And they're getting the same kind of efficiency out of it that you and I get out of a railroad gauge, track gauge that's standard, or an electric plug for 110 or a bigger voltage appliance. we don't have to worry about that standardization. We don't even think about it, and we get enormous efficiencies out of it. The United States is getting itself into a position in data that's very similar to the position we're in measurements. We're still using inches and pounds when the rest of the world is using meters and centimeters and kilograms, et cetera. We are so far behind, we don't even know what we don't know, and the inefficiencies that these lack of defined data fields is causing us. Now, I know I'm singing to the choir here, but we've got a larger audience beyond just what shows up on the screen. And I'd like to just grab people by the scruff of the neck and say, we have to be competitive in a world market. We cannot bear a 10, 20% inefficiency ratio because we don't have standard data between ourselves. So I'm real interested in this as a national feature. And I worked with Darrell Issa, whom Dixon mentioned a minute ago, was a congressman from California. He was chairman of Government Operations Committee. He was the House sponsor for the Data Act. He was the partner with Mark Warner, who's a Democratic senator, who also sponsored the Data Act. And even though it was just a very small toe in the water for the federal government, it gave us a platform to work from. We need to understand how competitively this is impacting us, and we need to understand that we can, in fact, change things. I am delighted to have spent almost 20 years on this head-banging process because it's actually happening. In this panel today, we've got pieces of the puzzle that fit together, and we're just about to start that flywheel running that'll be more and more efficient. Let me stop here. Dixon, is there anything I didn't cover that you wanted?
No, but thank you for bringing up the World Economic Forum. COVID-19, we know is impacting all of our lives and is creating quite a disruption. The question is how can we take advantage of this crisis to create something positive? The World Economic Forum has put out a quest called the Great Reset. And our collaboration group has submitted a proposal that the legacy problems of fragmented, just like Peter talked earlier, fragmented systems and inability to communicate. The Great Reset is a simple way for all of our people to communicate effectively. And so we're submitting to the World Economic Forum, and hopefully we can help continue this outreach and bring more people along to influence them toward open standards. But influencing means it's a big platform, and there's a lot of people out there doing a lot of very innovative things. And a lot of those innovative things touch base with the grid. And a lot of those things could also be referred to as the Internet of Things. And so one of the platforms that has been very successful in helping programmers build the tools and technology that can allow our grid to modernize is Salesforce. And we've been very pleased with Charlie's continuing support and contributions on Salesforce toward the orange button. So Charlie, if you would touch base, if you would, on Salesforce and your big picture.
Yeah, so thanks so much, Dixon, and thanks again for herding the cats to get us all together. And I'm really hoping, I'm keeping my fingers crossed that the World Economic Forum will pick up on this great message, because data standardization is huge, and it's going to bring the world together. It's going to bring people together. It's going to allow us to exchange data like we've never done before. And we like to think that my company, Salesforce, is part of that platform for change. And I just want to shout out to everybody, all my fellow panelists here who have contributed so greatly to this idea and this concept. And you're probably wondering why Salesforce, the audience is wondering why Salesforce and how Salesforce plays into all this. We don't do the first mile, which isn't, we don't build solar panels, but we connect to them. And we take the data. We have something called Sustainability Cloud, for example. So we can standardize on the data using XBRL format. And you're going to hear a little bit later from Jan about how the standards are evolving and changing, and how Jan's making a positive effect in that area. But when you can bring the data into a common platform and exchange the data that way, it's very useful, all the way from the edge into the cloud. And once you've done that, then things can benefit positively and changes can be made in great ways. So I'll leave you with one more idea and concept. If there are any existing Salesforce customers out there that want to experiment with this data standard, give me a call, email me, and even if you're not a Salesforce customer, that's fine too. And we could put the full power of Salesforce behind this and get you up and running, because we're looking for first adopters, early adopters. So thanks very much, Dixon, for giving me this opportunity to talk. Oh, do we lose Dixon? Oh, he froze for a minute. There
All
he
right.
goes.
Mike?
Okay.
So Dixon, I might add to what Charlie just said, if you're there. I don't know if anybody see me?
Yeah, I can see you, and we lost Dixon, I think. So go ahead.
I think we did.
Yeah,
So
we got you.
let me just jump in there for a minute, because what you need to understand, because the SEC requires every public company to report in a defined language, the beauty of XBRL is it carries, with the data, it carries a definition of what the data is and where it came from. And it's magic in terms of moving data around and programming and not having to people don't have to coordinate with each other because the data does the coordination for them. And you've got every public company in the United States, every public company in the European market, all the Japanese companies, all the Singaporean companies, many of the Indian companies, and most of the Chinese companies, all using these formats. And we just need to be sure we're not left behind.
Yep. And it looks like we just lost Dixon. Hopefully he's not caught up in the firestorm in California. And hopefully he's not evacuating his home, and hopefully he'll be back on. But do you think we should hear from, who is next on the agenda? Was it Jan?
Yeah, I think that we should go to Jan. If I recall correctly, she was next in line.
That sounds great. My name is Jan Rippengale. I am the CEO of Blue Banyan, and we have software that is business management software for the solar ecosystem. So we support manufacturers, installers, financiers, develop solar systems. And part of that mission that is critical for us is that we have data standardization across the industry so that we can connect all of the interested parties in an efficient way, in a consistent way, to communicate on this common basis in our data standardization. So as part of that, we've been out in the working group, working in the working group steadily for a couple years now. And I just thought I'd give a little context for how that works. So the Department of Energy set up a grant initially for the Orange Button taxonomy development and the establishment of the working group. SunSpec Alliance was the one who received that grant to implement it. The main players in establishing the initial reference implementations here have included Blue Banyan, NREL, SunSpec, Raise Green, and Wells Fargo. And one of the first reference implementations, and there are several more in place already, but the first one, and the one that appears to be incredibly impactful across the solar industry, is the AHJ registry, which are authorities having jurisdiction or permitting agencies. On the roadmap, we're also working with the product code registry, and we're going to be, commercializing the monthly operating reports and on and on. So the substantial adoption that has begun over this summer came because we had a couple different pivots with Orange Button. So the first pivot is that we needed to look at that taxonomy and make some adjustments. So we have shifted some of the XBRL. We're using the same success elements that made XBRL successful and have ported them over to JSON so that we can work in a REST API using an open API structure. And this has given us access to more programmers who can develop things quickly to move this forward. We've also found that by having fewer terms that are more generalized, more object-oriented, we have been able to establish some reusability and help those programmers anticipate what's going to happen and where to find what they need. We've also incorporated some design patterns so that with the same thing that they can anticipate what it is that's going to happen. A key insight that we had in addition to this taxonomy, which is like the wrapper on a piece of candy, the only way anyone's interested in figuring out how that wrapper works is when there's candy on the inside. And that candy in our world is the data. So by marrying the taxonomy with the data with the AHJ registry, because the only API that you can use to connect to the AHJ registry is an orange button API. You have to figure out how the orange button taxonomy works, but then you get the candy on the inside. And the AHJ registry at this point is pretty simple, and it's going to grow substantially in the next few months. But basically you can send in either the geolocation coordinates or the address, and you can get back which AHJ has jurisdiction. Super simple, but many, many people are excited about it. The other key element for this is that we needed to present it as a bowl of candy. So the AHJ registry is free to the public. It is hosted by SunSpec, and it comes bundled with Solar Success for free for all of the Blue Banyan clients who have Solar Success software running their business. And in this way, we're building it into the tools. We expect it to be utilized by SolarApp. We're building it into the tools as they're developed. So by making that available, bowl of candy, who can resist?
So you got more slides, go ahead.
Oh, I've just got a couple more. So here's some early adopters. These are installers who are using the AHJ registry, as well as the next tools I'm going to talk about, but it's getting adopted by Aurora, who's doing a permit application development tool. SolarApp is doing permit application submission. Raise Green is a developer who's using it, and a customer engagement software that directly interfaces with homeowners with 17 terawatts in Bodie is also using it. So as you can see, we've got wide adoption across the industry. Here is a picture of the Solar Success ecosystem. You can see that the orange button is a very important concept for us, and we have labeled it, and we're starting to get adoption. So we started with the AHJ registry over here, but we have also integrated getthereferral.com, which sends in leads and then gets project status for how residential solar projects are moving along, when they get their permit, when their installation scheduled, when they actually get turned on. And same thing with a customer engagement tool with Bodie. So we are actively sending information about residential solar projects in addition to the AHJ registry over the orange button with the orange button taxonomy.
Thank you, Jen, and I hope I'm back.
Yes, you're back. I just have one more quick thing, if it's okay.
Oh, yep.
Yep, so we're moving from innovators to early adopters, and we still need a lot of help. So as we move through this curve and we move to take over the industry, please be sure to let us know if you've got any place that you'd like to contribute and come in and help make the vision happen.
So there's another slide there that might help, Jan, which is this is the concept that something that makes is an added expense initially, and then as it gets more and more important, it becomes a competitive advantage. And you see concentration take place in an industry because people have used the competitive advantage to get both more efficient and more effective. So from my point of view, we had a lot of politics involved in getting XBRL started, and we actually had to have the force of a regulator make it happen. But once it happened, we began to see this proliferation of people because information's power, and a lot of people didn't want the information out there and didn't want it to be comparable. So you had a whole 10-year period where naysayers were trying to be sure that it didn't work. But eventually it became a competitive advantage, and now people can't operate effectively without it.
I suspect we're going to see a similar pattern. And the attraction model, the candy, has been super helpful to get everybody to take that first step and realize that it's not so hard. They can do this too and move forward.
Yeah. Well, so Jan, and again, my apologies. I had a backup plan in case my technology failed, which it did. We wanted to prove to everybody this really is a live presentation. So we're live. And so now you can see my daughter's bedroom in the background instead of the USI office building in San Francisco. But Jan, what you're talking about is developing the underwriting information ultimately for residential and commercial sized projects. but the data elements that are in those residential projects have to be really the same as in the largest utility scale. And so being able to harness data is just as important at the utility scale. And so I've asked Dave Crowley from Birch to kind of talk a little bit about the big picture and the utility scale and the leveraging of data on that side. David?
Thank you, Dixon. Hello, everyone. My name is Dave Crowley with Birch Infrastructure. We are an employee-owned organization, startup about 2 years ago now. And we focus on renewable energy for the large hyperscalers that are consuming. We do have an origination project that we're deploying in Arizona, where something like Orange Button becomes very, very valuable. The amount of time, documentation, and trying to pull together all the different nuances as you try to tie into a substation is very complex and time consuming. And if you miss something in the legalese, it can really cost you a lot in the end. So having a central point where the information is gathered, aggregated together, is really a bright spot for us and how this will perform as we go forward, and really trying to bring renewable energy, whether it be solar, wind, hydro, pump hydro, battery backup, and those types of solutions to these large hyperscale consumers, because a lot of those individual users, data center third-party suppliers to the hyperscalers as well, they don't really understand how to go out and acquire renewable energy. It's important for them to do so. They're giving corporate edicts to do so, but they struggle with how to do it. The large users, they have the ability to be able to make those kind of errors in their contracting, which can cost them, in some cases, billions of dollars, but that's okay. That's easily hidden underneath their trillion-dollar valuations. And not so much for other third-party suppliers who don't understand how to mitigate the risk and utilize services like Dixon and his company offer to be able to hedge and guarantee and cover the actual performance of those individual deployments. So it's critical, as well as getting real-time information as you're experiencing even today, Dixon, in California, right? I mean, the energy rates are they're all over the place because of the blackouts and the fires and what's happening to your actual origination of products. So it's very important to be able to find a central point where we can gather, collect, distribute, contribute to that information. And I do appreciate and thank you for allowing Birch to have the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, David. And so you have the residential side, you have the utility side, but they ultimately have to have a partner in the utility, because that's really where the connection is made. And it's a very challenging situation. So Arun, I've asked to come talk a little bit about what it's like to sit in that hot seat.
Thank you again, Dixon, for inviting me to this interesting panel. So I'm a big proponent of data standardization. Data is the key that unlocks a lot of value. And solar is one of the most interesting industries for us. We are highly promoting solar because solar is our hedge to growing electrification. We are seeing electrical transportation going electrical, heating going electrical. So there's a huge load growth coming. And solar really softens that load growth for us. So we are a big proponent of solar. And so I've been watching this solar market from both a consumer perspective and a utility perspective. I have solar panels in my own home. So from a utility perspective, the model is very, very, it was very fragmented years ago. And we are starting to coalesce around standardized processes in chunks today. And we see this evolving into a more seamless across the board, multiple processes coming together. And data is the key that's going to unlock. So I'm viewing the orange button exactly the way we viewed green button, which was launched about 5-6 years ago. Again, another federal government program that was basically launched to coordinate data that utilities provide in their utility bills. And today everybody gets a paper bill, but there is a green button data format that you can sync up, and you can have 10 different apps on your phone that can read it seamlessly, whether you're in California or New York, it doesn't matter, right? So there we saw the power of green button do magic to the utility business. The same thing, we see a much bigger role orange button could play in the solar business. And we are seeing the solar business also evolve in time. I'm starting to see solar business is starting to feel more and more, especially the medium and large sizes, looking more and more like mortgage-backed securities. And so if you go talk to an installer or a solar developer, they are builders. They don't understand the financial You talk to the finance banks, they don't understand the solar risk. And they sit in the sidelines and they don't bring capital, or very few niche players are in the market who know how to play the game. And there are a lot of developers who are accessing the capital markets through a lot of intermediaries, and that's adding a huge amount of soft cost to the projects. So end of the day, what we are seeing is solar projects have to get a lot more affordable for people to adopt. And that affordability is now getting very elusive because of a lot of inconsistencies, both in the data management, and you need these specialized folks who understand the market, and the mass market is not jumping in. And so if you go talk to an average bank, a medium-sized bank, not like Wells Fargo, they don't know how to deal with solar, and they're not stepping in with their capital muscle to help. And the only way this industry is going to grow is we need to make this financial grade from starting to end with as little variation as possible, so nobody's spending time and redoing every step of the way. And utilities have a huge role creating that central trust, because they have to touch us for interconnection, and we anyway impose standards, and if somebody is not maintaining standards, we can refuse to interconnect for safety and grid integrity. And so we think we have a huge market position to drive standardization, adoption of standardization. So we are looking at the orange button as a means to both increase solar adoption, reduce the soft cost, which is where the biggest pain point for solar is today that's holding back, and also make it more affordable and accessible to customers. And we think that'll really open up the market. I've spoken to developers, and some developers say somewhere between 10 to 40% of the soft cost gets locked up in the processing work, right? And that is something that is huge. If you have 40% inefficiency, and if data can take even half of it, that's a huge jump for us, and that's where we are more interested. So our end game is to make it affordable with data, make it more financial grade, so that it can be more securitized and monetized, and bring new players who can bring capital, and that scale will still further drive down the price. So the end game is decarbonization, safety, affordability, and data can unlock a lot of it. So with that, I'm going to wait for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, National Grid has always been a leader, and thank you very much for joining the panel. But you said something quite succinct there. You said at the end of the day, it's the contractor and the developer community that are having a challenge. And the person who's trying to align those contractors and work with the construction industry and bring them into this fold is Nathan Wood with the Construction Progress Coalition. And they've been working on the Common Data Exchange and have been partnering with the Orange Button to try to create the construction synergy with the utilities and with the financial markets. So Nathan, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Dixon. I was just thinking, Aaron, as you talked about the 40%, that I'm sort of representing a good chunk of that 40% of that soft cost waste that we're creating. Because those of you that don't keep up with all the McKinsey reports on construction that come out every few months, I think last one, construction is the second lowest, or least digitized industry, just above agriculture and hunting. So we're really setting the bar pretty low for digitization and what's possible, but a ton that we can really learn, and that's a lot of where Construction Progress Coalition, that was started in 2017 as a 501c3 nonprofit, is really around education, that there's so much standardization efforts, interoperability efforts, these efforts that are going on, but just lack of adoption, usually because of, as Jan brought up with the whole, call it the candy analogy or the carrot or the stick, or what there just isn't that incentive structure for the adoption. And so that's really where we've tried to focus is used design thinking methodologies, use sort of other outside ways to bring more perspectives together, just like Dixon's done a tremendous job doing, to really understand the holistic weight of the problem and really create the crises that we need in order to make the changes that are necessary. And so we've tried to kind of reshape and as someone newer coming into the industry and learning all these past interoperability standards efforts, trying to learn from what has been done in the past, but also look at the new thought process of this API interconnected world where it doesn't necessarily have to be one standard or one central system, but it can be this ecosystem of common platforms and sort of this newer way of thinking. So I've learned more every time I have these conversations and learn from really smart people around me, but try and bring as much of the contractor's perspective, the designer's perspective, the liability perspective, even the AHJ that was brought up is something that we bring up all the time. Of if we're not considering that perspective, they might be a huge lever in a lot of this change, and really thinking about the mechanics of how do we make these changes? And so last thing I'll leave you with, I'm sure if I didn't say it, Dixon would, but I'm working with John Killingsworth at Colorado State University. We just put together a proposal for some DOE funding that would be, Jan, primarily working with you and others to really look at the business mechanics, look at, creating circular economic business models for exchanging data and for giving away data. Because I found it sort of ironic in my research that there was a much better adoption of data submission and data standards in the residential side of solar than there was in commercial, mainly because they had set up an incentive structure that made sense, that you would submit something and get your permit back, or get, a if this then that exchange. And I think we're really missing that in the corporate world, because we're brokering much bigger deals and it's a lot more layers and complexity, but excited to kind of dig into that, because I think that is that final frontier that will make all this come together. Back to you, Dixon.
Thank you. So all of this talk about trying to get fragmented the construction industry, and from the construction up, at the end of the day, we have to get that information into the credit markets. And we have two people that have joined our panel today from the credit markets. And our objective with the orange button is to, whether or not you're an insurance or a bank, they're both credit instruments. If we can have it to where they're both looking for the same information and aligning the insurance industry and the capital markets, financial markets together. So one of the main leaders in this is my friend John Previtali. And so John, why don't you talk a little bit about the monthly operating report and your work with the Orange Button, and Wells Fargo's leadership role in helping the Orange Button become the public benefit, and how the taxonomy is helping you.
Great, thank you, Dixon. Yeah, we at Wells Fargo are a huge advocate of standardization using the Orange Button. And we are encouraging our customers to send us data in the Orange Button format, both to monitor the performance of our portfolio of solar and, frankly, wind assets as well, because we believe the Orange Button format can apply to wind. And also send us data for what we call the origination process, where we review proposed projects for funding and perform due diligence on those projects, both commercial and technical due diligence. We, to be candid, have had a hard time scaling our business. We provide approximately 10% of the financing to the wind and solar industry in the United States. So it's a very large portion. We finance several gigawatts of wind and solar a year. And we would like to do more. And we would also like to better serve the distributed generation, or the rooftop solar and parking canopy solar space for commercial and industrial customers. One of the things that's happened over the last few years is that we've really gravitated towards large utility scale projects, and we're very happy with that. But one of the reasons is that there's so much data associated with essentially processing the financing and also monitoring the performance of these projects, that it's much easier for us to perform that work using large projects instead of lots of smaller projects. We just can't hire enough people to essentially meet the demand for solar and all the projects, work with all the projects that our customers are bringing to us. So yeah, as I mentioned, I'm highly encouraging our customers to use the Orange Button format. And also we have contributed software to the open source Orange Button effort. Most recently, one of the brightest minds at Wells Fargo in software technology contributed the OBTV interface, which is a free interface for people to see and search the Orange Button taxonomy. So, and that is completely public. It is a donation that we made to the world in order to basically help our customers, help us scale, and also to achieve a very important goal, which I need to mention, and that is a $200 billion commitment to reducing carbon emissions over the course of this decade. So Wells Fargo is trying to deploy $200 billion to help reduce global warming by 2030. And frankly, if the world needs more than that, we will bring it to the table. We are that serious about this issue. Thank you, Dixon.
Thank you, John. And you said something quite succinct there, that this money can actually impact climate change. And I think that's important, but at the end of the day, we still have to get the credit out there. And one of the ways that the banks can provide more capacity is if the risk is better managed. And so even in the report that General Wisely and Daryl Issa put together, they said the insurance community plays a real role, just as the bank does, in establishing the framework in which creates that kind of uniformity and consistency. And so bringing that credit to the table is critical. And so one of the key players in the energy space is coming in is surety. Surety generally hasn't been in the energy space because it's been run by utilities, and surety has been more in the public work sector. But the private sector is now looking for financial products to manage risk so that more capacity can come out. And so, Mike, you joined me in Texas last year for when the summit was in person. But Mike Bond from Hermes has been one of the leaders in creating financial products that are tailored to the energy space. So, Mike, why don't you touch base a little bit on your efforts?
Sure, Dixon. And first of all, I'm very happy to be here and speaking today. I'm the head of surety for Euler Hermes, which is a global credit and surety company, and we have extensive exposure to the energy sector. But really, my joy in being here is often surety and new financial tools aren't generally mentioned in the same sentence. I mean, surety is a product that's been around for a long time, and I think it's resisted change. But in spite of that, I think we have a pivotal role in the development of energy projects, and especially renewable. You know, if you're not aware, surety provides performance security in the form of a surety bond for projects, for project completion, for license and permit, for restoration, and even bonding long-term interconnection commitments. So surety does have an important role in these projects, and a bondable project is also a project which can be financed. So that, I think that leads to successful projects if you can bring all those pieces together. But like John, for me to do my underwriting and due diligence, I need to look at a lot of data. So I'm looking at data from the sponsors and their financials. I'm looking at the project projections. I'm looking at the technology. And that's only at the beginning. And if my bond is in place through the life of the project, which often they are, I want data through the whole entire life cycle of that project. And because of all that, I'm a massive consumer of data. And the more that we can package that data in a way which is standard, digital, and portable, it allows me to consume that data that much better throughout our support. And I think it's logical, right? I mean, and I like Jan's analogy to candy. I mean, I want to eat the candy because that's sweet, right? I don't want to have to get a submission in a PDF format and spend my time, putting the data in field by field, because in a lot of cases, let me tell you, that's what we're doing. And the easier it is for us to consume that data, the more likely it is that we will want to have a positive outcome with that information. I mean, it's logical, right? If it comes to me in a way that I can import into my system, I can manipulate that data, I can analyze it, I can underwrite it, not just in the beginning when we first commit to the project, but during the entire life of that project. I mean, if I can do that, I'm much more willing to entertain a project. I'm much more willing to extend surety credit, and to do it in a way, in a cost-effective way. If I'm having to manually plow through the information and I'm getting reports in a way that I can't consume in an efficient way, it's going to be much more difficult for me to say yes to a project. And you know, surety does have a role in these projects, and without the surety bond, often the projects can't move forward. So, you know, I'm a big supporter of that, the data standardization, portability, whether it's an orange button or some other format where we can consume the data, process the data, and use it in a way that leads to successful projects. So thanks again for letting me speak for a few minutes on surety and the benefits of surety.
Mike, thank you very much. So just, I know we have a little bit of time for question and answers. I would summarize it by, on this panel are different members of the ecosystem, from the bigger picture from the UN with Al Berkeley, to the residential, to the solar, to the utility scale, to the utility itself, to the banks. We are all saying the same thing. If we had standardized data, we could do our job better, faster, cheaper. And as we started off with Pete's comment, he said the most important thing for public safety is notification and situational awareness. The same is true for maintaining our grid. And when we put these tools in to build the grid, we also have those tools to guarantee the grid's resiliency. So what I wanted to throw it back to the panel, if there's any comments you'd like to follow up with, or if anybody has any questions from the audience.
Well, I would like to re-emphasize how important it is in the financial world, pick up on some of Arun's comments, that if you give the data more accurately and more quickly in a standardized format, you reduce risk. It's like the difference between a credit card and a debit card. The debit card fees are cheaper because the risk evaporates. It's not a promise to pay from somebody in 30 days. It's an instant payment. So that model, that analogy is really powerful and will reduce the risk in investing in solar, for example, and make the pool of money available much, much larger.
I'll riff on that and say that, you know, one of the problems that we have is because of so much manual transcription of data, like that problem that Mike was talking about, getting data from PDFs and putting it into, you know, spreadsheets or our database. We have errors. And, you know, when you're talking about projects that are hundreds of millions of dollars, those errors can be quite large. So the benefit of having consistent and error-free data using Orange Button is also incredibly valuable to us.
Charlie, I'm going to throw this over to you. One of the platforms that some of the greatest innovations are being developed right now is on the Salesforce platform. And as the Internet of Things impacts the energy field, tell us some of the interesting projects you've seen, if I may, that you've seen people in the energy or just in the efficiency, or how we're responding to COVID-19.
Yeah, sure. So thanks for calling on me for that. And I want to add to what John just said about the importance of validating data as it comes in, since I'm interrupting. The ability to identify those errors and then trigger workflows are also key. Like if you could, when you import something into a platform, and if you could trigger activities and workflows that, or maybe even using AI to say, hey, this field doesn't look quite right, and send a notification to someone sitting on top of Orange Button, that's very powerful as well. But back to IoT, I've got everything. I don't know if you can see my video, but this is my latest favorite customer is Life Signal. I mean, this is a connected patch. You wear this. This is a COVID-19 remote patient care monitoring capability, and believe it or not, this is just like a solar panel, right? A solar controller. We can push the data into Salesforce, take action if my ECG looks bad, or my heart rate looks bad, or my SpO2 level, my oxygen levels drop. I might be getting COVID. So call the doctor, trigger workflows. So I have a lot. COVID-19 is really accelerating IoT, and it's actually benefiting solar and wind and everything else, because now we have more IoT use cases. And I'm sure all of the other companies that have platforms are seeing the same thing, where everybody's doubling down now on connectivity into the cloud to trigger anomaly detection and how do you do, like when you push solar and wind information into a cloud, you can build something like a sustainability cloud. So you can see how much money you're saving, right? You can get the candy at the end of the tunnel, right? You can prove to your boss the business value of actually doing Orange Button because you can show in a dashboard, look how much money we're saving, right? Or look how much money we're generating from all these capabilities. So hopefully that answered your question. Sorry, I probably went too long.
Oh, that was great.
Okay.
So, David, you're trying to build data centers now, which is a big push. Data centers are getting a lot of demand as a result of COVID-19. How uniform are all those various data centers and the people you're dealing with? Are they all fragmented like we were talking about? And how do we influence them to come to join the collaboration?
I really think it's reaching into some of their established forums, like dealing with the iMasons, folks like that volunteer their time to come in and share ideas that help to better develop data center ecosystems. But they like us are starving for the data, and I think as Mike mentioned, having to transcribe something from a fixed document to another, now a living document, and you have a human in the middle, there's a good chance, probably 90%, that there's going to be errors. And how do we catch them before they become, as John said, $100 million mistakes, right? Because they can be fatal to projects. So I think encouraging them to look at the taxonomy as a sole source will just make them a more intelligent buyer of services, right? And again, like I said, we're combing through documents from the early 1900s when some of these things were formulated, looking for certain, whether it be a loophole or some kind of law that was written that has a positive and or negative impact on your project. And sometimes, as John's shaking his head, you don't find out till it's too late and you funded it. So as much data as we can get to clean it out, because it allows me to be more expeditious in putting together my data room that John's going to want to come into before he funds my project. So if I can get more of that clean data in there early, it helps him do his analyzation on whether that's a project that he wants to go forward with and fund. So it really brings some uniformity across the platform. And let me tell you, all the way from Microsoft, Amazon, Google, they're all struggling with the same thing. What do I do to analyze the data? I've got mountains of it coming in, don't know what to do with it all.
I think we should go to Jan, but I do agree that it starts with the big boys. It starts with the Facebooks and the Googles and those that have a lot of skin in the game, right? And get them aligned around something, and then it kind of spreads from there. But I know Jan.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it'll be a forcing function that will make the Cyrus Ones and the Core Sites and the Equinixes, which are really servicing those large clients, it'll force them into aligning with that as well.
So one of the things that I observe about how using Orange Button affects software developers is one of the elements that you have to build into an Orange Button taxonomy is the primitives, and which include units. So one of the things that came up when we were working with a software design, working with Aurora's API, is that they started out with a residential focus. And one of their key data elements was system size. And system size of 4.5 could be a small house, it could be a small commercial, or it could be a substantial utility scale, depending on if it's kilowatts or megawatts in what you're doing. And as they are growing as a company, now they care to specify exactly what units they are using. And by shifting to an Orange Button API standard now, then they're setting themselves up to be able to work at any of those scales and to benefit, to bring the benefits of their technology to that entire expanse of options, versus kind of getting stuck in tunnel vision from the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, my previous employer, when I was leaving, they were looking for 500 megawatts to a gigawatt deployments. That's not small potatoes.
Yeah,
that's how much they're growing.
Yeah, exactly. And so if software developers started with Orange Button, then they would be set up from the beginning to be able to handle all these scales. They could be set up to be massively successful.
But your point about megawatts to kilowatts to whatever, it's like the millennial scare, right? Of, like, because we didn't have 4 digits in our year and the whole world blows up. And it's like, but those are the little things that we always miss, right? And I think we're at that point now where we're actually hitting those little things and taking the time to make sure we don't miss them, so we don't have another millennium.
And add to that, take another step forward and think about how the telecommunications infrastructure grid works. And if we could apply the same software-defined type networking to the electrical grid, you get some really excellent returns on that.
And Nathan, you have some large EPC contractors that are part of your group, and they're looking for solutions like everyone else, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Zachary Construction, Mortensen. I mean, anybody from any side cares about this. The question is, how much do they care? Do they care enough to muddy the waters or kind of mix things up and really change things? And I think that's the question, is who can and who will drive it. Will it be more government AHJ driven? Will it be more owner driven? Will it be a balance of both? Because I think contractors are more than ready and willing and slightly frustrated, but most of our conversations have led to the fact that contractors really don't care unless there's a reason to care. And so, they may care to track their own data and their own financials to a very high level of detail, but they're not going to share it with a surety or anybody else unless there's an incentive to, right? And so what is that candy that they get for sharing their data? I think if there isn't an answer to that, we're still stuck in the same problems we've had for the last, decade or so.
Well, yeah, and you just said it's the candy, and I can tell you what the candy is. They get access to the financing as a developer, and as a contractor, they get access to the construction contract. If they're told, Mr. Contractor, you can have this contract if you give me the data, they'll do it. About every contractor I've seen, but they won't do it if they're not asked to.
Yeah. If you give me data, then I give you money or whatever. Yeah. It has to be that exchange. Otherwise it won't happen.
So insurance products, surety products, and financial products, if access to those products are improved by having the data, that's when they'll do it. And it'll be by, as Alfred mentioned earlier, there has to be a bit of a mandate. So if the bank says, in order to get this rate, you have to do this, or the regulators, the HJ say, in order to get a permit, you have to give me the data in orange button standard, that will drive the demand. Everybody's ready to go in. And, and Arun, you sort of touched on it. The utility has the trust factor. You really are there. But you've got multiple competing forces, political, number one, bureaucracy, and just the scope of what you have to do to do anything different. How do you see the future of all the utilities coming along in this regard?
So there is need for standardization for safety and grid integrity. So we are already seeing that happen. There is a second trust factor. Utilities are always monitoring the solar assets because they're pumping energy into the grid. You got to monitor for grid integrity. And that's a function that's already we are seeing missing in the market. A lot of solar assets are built by somebody, and within the first 6 years after the tax equity time is up, it just changes hands so many times. And somebody who's actually owning the asset has no idea what a solar farm sometimes is. It's purely a monetary instrument at that point. And we have seen solar farms with grass growing and performance not coming, and somebody's relying on that performance to monetize and pay their bills, right? And so there is a lot of missing pieces to fully extract value from solar. And we are already there managing that asset for its lifetime. We are totally responsible if something goes wrong. Already there's rapid shutdown requirements are coming from a fire safety standpoint. There is a flexible interconnection shutdown or those things are coming for hosting capacity standpoint. So we have to manage the solar assets digitally for its life. So that is becoming our reality. And so we do have a need to standardize it for just the fundamental grid operation. So I think we have a potential to mandate it. And if we don't interconnect it, the solar does not exist. It's an islanded system. So I do think utilities have a great value to create and a great value to realize by standardizing data in a format that is applicable across the board.
Well, thank you. And we've come up to the end of our hour, and I just want to thank the DOE again. The DOE has been extremely aggressive in its Sunshot program and multiple national lab efforts to bring together collaborations of public and private interests and try to bring together that kind of success. So as a close, everybody here comes from different parts of the ecosystem, but we can all work together to help everybody move it forward. So thank you again very much for the new financial tools panel. We'll let you sign off.
Thanks, Dixon.
Thank you, Dixon.
Thanks, Dixon.
Andreas,
Thanks,
thank you
everybody.
very much for hosting.
Thank you, guys. Thank you,
Thank you.
guys.
Cheers.
Here, Andres.
Thank you, Andreas.